Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for the warm introduction. And indeed, it's a pleasure to be here, to get this opportunity to moderate this session with a stellar lineup of people, professionals that we have from multiple stakeholders. Before doing that, let me just quickly lay out the broad parameters in terms of how we would like to go about this. The subject that we have today is innovations for future of mobility, right? So what we'll do is we'll start off with, I'll just give a brief, kind of understanding of the subject, and then I'll go one by one to get your views on the subject before we get into the real Q&A. And later, I would also like to get the audience involved to get some interaction going. We have a lot of young students. I'm sure they have a lot of questions to ask our experienced panelists in terms of the future of mobility. So clearly, if you look at the industry today, I mean, there's this huge transition that we are experiencing from what we know as an auto industry to being a mobility industry, right? And if you look at the past few years, there have been a lot of changes that we have seen in the industry. Companies are looking at new strategies, they're re-looking at their objectives and goals. And largely, if you look at the way the auto industry or the mobility industry globally, we talk of a few key mega trends. You can give it any name. We call it CASE, case, connected, autonomous, shared, electrified, or you can talk about it in terms of made, with digitalization being another key mega trend in the global mobility industry. The kind of changes that we see today, young people and also old people, they are rethinking their need to buy vehicles, right? We see the whole model being changing from owning vehicles to rather using vehicles as a mode of service. We look at mobility as a service, right? We have on-demand ride services. We have big data and analytics being talked about. And there's, of course, talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning kind of impacting how vehicles and how the mobility sector will be in the future. So today, when you look at our panelists, we have professionals from vehicle makers. We have from Ricardo Engineering Services, we have Mrs. Soumya from the Delhi government, and Mr. Arya from Panasonic, and Mr. Talwar from IBM. And gentlemen, if we can start off by getting your perspective on innovation for the future of mobility, but let us also talk about the present and how do we really look at this transition from what we have today and what we are likely to see in the future.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here, and I promise that I will not pretend to know more than what I know, and so I don't have a crystal ball really to say that what is lying in the future, but I'll still try to say what I believe and I think is more likely. So in terms of, in fact, while just chatting with Gaurav, I was talking about transformation. I think transformation is something which is always in continuum. It never stops. We keep transforming because of various changes which we have across various parts of the world, various social changes, various technological changes, and that's something which is innate to the human nature. Humans can't really be satisfied with what they have already, and we always look for change. Now, specifically with respect to mobility, I think it started when the wheel was invented, and we have been, having a variety of changes across. And I also probably like to tell you, but most people would know that electric mobility, which is the talk of the town or the key subject as of now, is not new. It's just that we found petrol and diesel to be more viable, so we stuck to that and really stopped working on it. But again, this idea has come. But another thing which is extremely important for us to understand is that there are a lot of things which we, across industry and various parts of the world, we tend to follow, which is more of many times a fad. And then we all get engrossed with that kind of a direction. However, it's important for us and for any other country to realize that what are the issues which are faced by us, and our innovation strategy should be aligned with that. One of the examples I want to give you is that many people think that autonomous vehicles is something which perhaps is in future for India, and let it mature somewhere else, and India is not the case for that, etc., etc. But I believe that India is a fit case for autonomous mobility. And the reasons are many. One of the most important reason is that, especially in our country, we have not yet learned the discipline of driving the way various other developed parts of the world have, And I think most of us end up meeting a lot of traffic jams because of the way we should not be driving. And if we had autonomous driving, which would solve just the problem of this congestion, which is human-created congestion, we would be doing a great service to this nation and to the whole world by saving a lot of gallons of fuel and whatnot. So I would like to end here, and I think it's just an introduction.
Anything, Divyansh, you want to add? Okay. Okay. It's a pleasure being here, in this panel with the august set of panelists from the industry. When we speak about mobility, and it's been there for a while, right? I broadly think three big disruptions are happening. The big one being the ownership models, right? People are moving away from owning cars, and we see this trend. We see Ubers and Olas, the car hailing services, the cab aggregators, the cab sharing, applications taking forth. Peer-to-peer sharing is coming up. Similarly, there are integration with public modes of transportation, multimodal integrations, and you would have probably seen recent news of Uber integrating public modes of transportation as part of their apps as well. So the entire gamut of ownership models is significantly changing. Second aspect, when we talk about the consumer, the user of those vehicles, whether it's the driver or the occupant, right? There is a whole gamut of personalization which mobility can provide, and we are seeing automobile manufacturers being able to do that, either through allowing customers configuration of the physical features, and some of the automobile manufacturers have actually gone a level up and allowing configuration of digital features as well in the cars, which is taking and getting a lot of wow from the customers. We have been using services in India, and just to take an example of Ola Play, right? They offer entertainment. In some of the western part of the world, it's not just limited to entertainment, but you can actually think about education while you are driving in, and in the jams which Atul mentioned, right? And we all face every day. Use that time for productive use. It can be around health and fitness as well. Also, personalization can be in a form of a concierge, which offers you service, right? That's the second key one. Third thing which I think of is very, very important is around the vehicle itself. Yeah, how well your vehicle is doing. We have all heard about this term called self-healing vehicles, which essentially allows, through the power of data and analytics, to diagnose problems well in advance, so that you don't have that breakdown on the highway and you waste so many hours. Self-healing vehicles, self-configuring vehicles, right? So your Tesla does off-the-air updates in the night when your car is parked, and in the morning when you put the ignition on, you have the latest software updates on your Tesla. So self-configuration is there. The future is probably cognitive learning, right? So your vehicle learns basis the routes which you're following. It learns from the features, the digital features which you have used in your car. So it kind of personalizes your experience. The moment you put the ignition on, you have a personalized space of yours, which you can do. So I think broadly, those are the things, probably the three important things from an innovation standpoint, which I see playing an important role as we go further in this exciting space of mobility. Yeah.
Interesting, Gaurav. I'll come to Sriram. Your initial thoughts on the subject?
I want to do it a little bit different. I want to ask a question.
Sure, please.
So what does mobility mean to you? Based on what you've heard, I think, through the day. What does mobility mean?
Come on, let's see a few hands raised. On my left, what does mobility mean to you? Anyone? Okay, I see a hand going up right there.
All right. You got it. I think
Okay.
there are various ways to define mobility. I think we try to make it very complicated. I think mobility is about understanding a deep consumer desire to make things convenient, efficient, and effective. It's about doing anything. I mean, it goes back to invention of bulb to, talk about iPhone, combining three pieces of information, whether it's computing, music, and calling on one device. It's about, mobility is about trying to make things more convenient, more efficient, more effective. And it is done more and more in various platforms, whether it's electronics or vehicles, through convergence. Convergence of technology, convergence on human interface with the technology. So we talk about connected, case, autonomous, talk about shared EVs. I can talk a few things that I saw in my Nissan Technical Center out in Japan, which is probably the edge of technology. We got something called, I think you spoke about a concept called invisible to visible. I think, Gaurav, you were talking about the convergence of data with virtual world to the reality. So how would it be if you sit in a car, you're actually not there, but you can actually see what's behind that building that is approaching. And actually you're trying to monitor your traffic. To some extent, your Google Maps is already doing that. It is to make things convenient. I think the cars of future are going to combine data, information, and the desire the consumer has to be able to go from point A to point B in a simple, easy manner that the person can do something else. And it releases time for them to do something which they desire more. So we have a technology called I2V, invisible to visible, which is basically a combination of real and virtual world. There's another technology that we're working with is called B2V, which is brain to vehicle. So in the autonomous car, the whole concept of autonomous car is the machine takes over the human in terms of drive. But what B2V does is actually it connects our brain to the way it's coded to the way the vehicle drives. We're also talking about innovation on powering homes through battery-operated vehicles, through reverse power technology. The concept of mobility is quite enamored, and it's actually, seen quite, it makes it look very complicated, but it's actually quite simple. The democratization of this technology is what the hardest part is. How do we bring it to a common public? How do we actually bring it down to that person who is willing to be able to afford it, make it accessible, so that we can sell, and we also as organizations make money out of it? Because at the end of the day, we are not a non-profit organization. I think that's a concept, the way I understand mobility, from a very simplistic perspective, it's about democratizing convergence technology to make it beneficial to the customer in an easy, accessible manner so that businesses can make money.
Okay, Soumya. This will be a slightly different perspective compared to the previous three. Let's hear it from you.
Okay, thanks, Dipanshu. So, I come from a public transportation domain. So, if you can call me, I am an old school guy. So, from my perspective, if you look at it, mobility is more than technology. Mobility is more like accessibility, sustainability, better, financials and business models, how you are using the technologies to take advantage of the people or give the advantage to the people, how they are using the mobility. We have seen lots of, we are already seeing lots of Uberization, Olas, and vehicle tracking systems, mobile apps. But let's talk about the infrastructure. Mobility without infrastructure, no, it can't work. What about roads? Maybe better accessibilities to the disabled, better accessibilities for connecting several modes of transportations. For example, you are moving from a metro to an auto, or maybe to a railway station. Should have accessibilities. So seamless accessibilities. So when I talk about seamless accessibilities, the seamless transformation in terms of technology is also required in terms of the fares, what you pay across the modes. You have buses, you have autos, taxis, metros, railways, rickshaws. So a mechanism in which you travel from point A to point B covering some other modes, but you pay only once. That's how the mobility should be. You have lots of examples all around the world. We have to come up to that level. So that's how we already have some NCMC, National Common Mobility platforms. Adaptability of these technologies are happening, but at a very slow pace. Banks are reluctant. So all these things are part of the future we need to adopt. And that's where I feel from the old school thoughts, infrastructures, business models, technologies, and seamless is the go-to place where we should reach the mobility towards. Technologies for vehicles are always there, and it will keep on evolving. That's my views on that.
Soumya, this isn't old school. This is future school. Okay, let's get our final view because before we head to the questions.
Yeah, thanks. Just to take a clue from what Shriram said. In fact, I was excited to answer your question. So, to me, mobility is, as one of our friends from the audience said, that movement of people from point A to point B. And to add to that, movement of goods from point A to point B. So that's a simple definition of mobility to me. And this concept of mobility has been there. It's nothing new. It's just that with the advent of internet and the way we are living in connected world today, it has become smart and innovative. And I may go further and say the second I, that is intelligent. So to me, today's mobility is all about smart, innovative, and intelligent. When Dipanshu started, he mentioned about the vehicle ownership pattern. Today we live in a world, there is no, like people are open to owning transactions. So when I say owning transactions, these are the new business models which are emerging. For example, there are three trends as part of the smart mobility. What I feel is, of course, the electric technology. Second is connected and autonomous. And third is MaaS, that is mobility as a service. And everything is happening in India. Please don't say that we have, yes, of course, we have a long way to go. But if you see in India, the sale of electric two-wheelers is more than 100,000 two-wheelers, more than 100,000 per annum, right? So we have been seeing the transformation. Second, the mobility as a service. You just move around today. If you go to Hyderabad or Chennai or NCR, Delhi and Bangalore, you'll find this last mile connectivity, what Mr. Soumya was saying about the seamless transportation, correct? Integration from, let's say, metro, from metro to, let's say, residences or to the point of destination. So guys like Rapido, Vogo, right? They're already here. So no one really thought that WIMS of the world, or what is happening in terms of emerging business models in Europe or the US, whether it is going to come to India or not. But yes, it is already there. So to me, I think India, huge opportunity, just to put things in perspective. The mobility as a service is here to stay, and we definitely, I personally feel that this is going to be a huge market and opportunity for the OEMs as well as the entire ecosystem. When I said about the intelligent mobility, I personally never thought in 2 decades of my experience that the software or the technology would play a big role. Today, 70%, the element of a car is 70% is all about software, right? The guys like IBMs and Microsofts and everyone, they are playing a big role in the ecosystem. So to me, I think today's mobility has been there always. That this is the world of smart mobility, intelligent and innovative mobility, just to achieve one objective, that is consumer experience. How convenient, how effective, and how safe. These are the three elements of today's mobility, and I think we are really fortunate that multiple things are happening in automotive ecosystem, and all the players, be it OEMs, tier 1 suppliers, and the IT service providers, all of them are participating, of course, with the government support. And the one objective what the ecosystem thrives to scale up is the consumer experience. So that's what my view is.
Excellent, Prasad. So, gentlemen, we've had varied, kind of opinions on what the future could look like. Prasad, you mentioned that when we talk of the mega trends, it's not just global mega trends, it's already there in India. I mean, in fact, that's a question I really wanted to ask. When we talk of these mega trends, especially the 5 areas of connected, electrified, shared, autonomous, and digitalization, right? How relevant are they, in your mind, for the Indian market today? Gaurav, can I have your views here?
I think, the best thing which the entire digital wave has done is it has cut down time significantly, right? Previously, technologies used to take ages to come. You used to have that cousin in US who used to talk about a technology, and it used to take 5 years to come to India. The entire benefit of the digital movement has been that it takes a minute or a second for the same platform to get launched in India. We saw Prasad talking about Rapido, which gives the last mile connectivity. All the 5 aspects which you talk about, connectedness, autonomous, shared, all of these in some way and form are already there in existence in India. Each of them may be at a different maturity level, yeah? And the maturity scaling is also hard to do because even in the Western world, this is an evolution which is happening across the spectrum. So India is right up there with each of these. In fact, we would not be surprised to see a first-of-a-kind innovation coming from India and being adopted by the Western world. I think that's a high probability and possibility of an innovation, enabled by digital, coming from India and being adopted by the Western world in the area of mobility.
Yeah, I mean, reverse innovation as they talk about. So that's a definite likelihood. Atul, I would like to come to you and ask you about, especially, the division that you head, energy, right? From an energy perspective, what are we really talking about? I mean, we do have different experiments being talked about. We have electric vehicles. We are talking about hydrogen as a fuel. We're talking of biofuel. We're talking of ethanol, methanol, right? So from an energy perspective, give us an understanding of what is it that India could expect, and what is the future to your mind?
Okay. Yeah, I think very interesting aspect, because as we all heard and we all experience, is that everything is being digitalized, everything is having computer and IT inside thing, your mobile phones, your cars. Suddenly we realize in last 5 years, cars are more electronic than, the mechanical design. The most important thing which we all need to understand is that to do everything we need energy. And that's where, and especially energy in today's time is almost synonymous with electricity, So we are transforming away from fossil fuels, variety of fuels, not just fossil fuels, variety of fuels. Mechanical energy is becoming electrical to the extent that we are now cooking using electricity, So we are using transportation with electricity. So I think to a large extent, that is one of the mega trends, that everything is pretty much going to electric, including hydrogen, by the way.
Right.
So, hydrogen eventually drives your vehicle by the way of electricity, which is kind of generated on board. So that's one thing which is very, very important for all of us to understand. And I'm glad you talked about it. We saw a blip of power while Mr. Ramanan was here, and we are in the capital of the country, So that's something which we need to be cognizant of, that when we are so dependent on one form of energy, it has to be completely dependable. We have people from IT industry. These guys plan, whether it is a data center or whatever. You plan for the business continuity. You need to have many times replication of that. The data is in a couple of places if it is a very, very important data. And so should be our reliability of our energy system. And that's a big gap as of today in this country. You step out of big cities and you don't have reliable power. I'll give you a very simple example. And that's where one of the areas which we have impacted, not really mobility, but we all use cell phones. And we have almost 500,000 telecom towers, as they call them, BTS space stations across the country. And you would be surprised, even today, these telecom towers depend on diesel generator to keep them powered. And if I told you the next information, you will be surprised. Telecom industry is the third largest diesel consumer in this country, after Indian Defense Forces and Indian Railways. We don't have anybody else bigger than them, And that's the situation we live in. So imagine that, and a telecom BTS base station is a 2.5 kilowatt DC power requirement. That's it. Now, if we are thinking of putting electric vehicles in all parts of the country, imagine how much power is required and how reliable it is. So we need to be very, very careful while we progress on this. And I think you mentioned already about the infrastructure. So you mentioned about road infrastructure. Fantastic, there are roads. People are putting charging stations. Fantastic, but where is the power? So I think there is a lot of scope. There is a lot of opportunity to innovate in the way we generate electricity, in the way we consume electricity, we transport electricity, etc., etc. So I think this is something very, very important. Now, you asked about future of these batteries and stuff like that. I think there has been a constant innovation in terms of battery as one technology. So the kind of batteries today, most popular lithium ion, they started about 30 years back as a new product. They went into our laptops and communication devices, and then they grew in terms of energy density and a variety of other use cases. And today we use them for powering a Tesla car or a two-wheeler or whatever. And similarly, we are now innovating. The world is innovating variety of chemistries which are likely to be 1,000 times more energy dense, which means that a battery which is today 50 kilogram will perhaps be 50 grams in future and will power the same Tesla car. So obviously these are the things which will come in future, but we need to be cognizant of the challenges which we will face, that it will put a demand on availability of energy and IBM used to have a tagline called on demand. So we are looking for that as a future.
Sure. I mean, there also exists the opportunity with solar, right? And then there are companies developing paints that could trickle charge batteries.
Absolutely.
So interesting innovations in the energy domain.
Absolutely.
For sure. Sriram, if I can move to you. A slightly different question we discussed ownership versus usership. Nissan, you've offered a subscription model on on your vehicles, right? So talk about it. How is this whole transition going to happen for consumers who really want to just use a vehicle for the definite time that he needs the vehicle for?
Yeah, so I think we talked a little bit. I think each one of us mentioned about shared mobility, right? It's about not wanting to own an asset. You know, what interesting parallel if I draw to real estate. I was talking to one of my friends in a bank who was looking at real estate portfolio. 5 to 10 years ago, the average age of someone who was buying a car, actually 20 years ago, someone who wanted to buy a house was 45 years. 10 years ago, that age came down to 35. Now it's moving back up, which means the guys who are at that age, who have still the income to be able to afford a house, still don't want to buy a house because they are okay to have a bigger house but rent it. Of course, it has various implications. So what happens is, even in cars, there is a definite shift, though small, a definite shift in people's want to own a car at that age. I mean, it's still small, but it's happening. And I think it's important for us to be able to provide the consumer with that option. It's all about choices, and we are there to give choices to consumer so that change will happen. Because at the end of the day, you know, as an OEM, there is a lot of things we can offer, but if the consumer is not being the choice, that innovation does not move forward.
Correct.
And if the choice is affordable and accessible, that definitely takes on. So we see that there are 4 or 5 cities in the country which are extremely high on internet as a way to buy or even go to the level of purchase. Bangalore, Pune are 2 major, top 2. And we see the percentage of cars which the customers will subscribe to in these cities growing significantly. I mean, we're talking to partners who've sold thousands of vehicles in the last, I wouldn't even believe it if I didn't know that. Thousands of vehicles are subscribed because they don't want to own it. Right. And people want to change. The average life of vehicle with an owner is actually reducing significantly. They want to change faster. And subscription provides that flexibility to change their vehicles faster. The choices and the flexibility actually takes over the extra cost they might be paying for subscription with respect to the equated monthly installments they're probably paying right now. And that's the value offering. It's a customer choice. They're willing to pay for convenience. And that's what we are trying to connect with. It's about having the freedom to own what you want and keep moving. Choose, absolutely. Choose what you want, but exactly. It's come in the age of waiting for, when I was young, for Chitrahar at 8 o'clock on a Friday night is over. It's Netflix, it's Amazon Prime, it's all OTT platforms. It's like, and everything is moving there. It's about what do you want? You want it now. Gratification is now. And that is the model that's going to move for also high, I would say, consumption price, consumption price equipments or buys, purchases. And that's what we are trying to buy into.
Okay, before I move to the next question, the small group of students that we have here, can we have a quick survey? How many of you really want to buy a vehicle once you get into a job? Or are you happy with the Ubers and the Olas? Happy with the Ubers and Olas? Or want to own a car? So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, about 10 hands going up. And almost 50%. So not bad at all. All right. We are right in the middle of transformation. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Atul. Soumya, I'll come to you more from a public transportation perspective. We know the whole problem with urban population, right? And there are various studies that talk about urban population growing to about 60% by 2030 from the current 50%. And it's only going to impact and kind of put more pressure on cities, right? From a public transportation mass mobility solutions perspective, how do you look at, of course, DIMS is doing phenomenal work in terms of trying to bring about new solutions. You also did mention that you are also consulting other countries. So give us a general perspective and understanding of what is it that you have understood in this whole transformation phase, and how is DIMS really looking at addressing challenges of the future?
Okay. Let me put it this way. We have learned while implementing. So that's the best way to give a consulting. So not bringing anything, reading anything. We have done it, understood it, imbibed it, made some changes, tweakings here and there, as per the demographics, as per the needs, and then given the consultancies. And that's how I think that's the best way to provide consultancy is all about. And how we are reaching to the masses who are living at the border areas or maybe away from the cities. That's might be the last mile connectivities we call it. That's a very important factor is that when we have mass rapid transit systems, like for many cities which we have, the sad part is that how to connect it. We don't have very good last mile connectivities today. And since we do not have last mile connectivities, adequate last mile connectivities today, we have a further challenges at the doorstep. What are those challenges? The unorganized electric rickshaws pushing the entire road space as well as the metro feeder connectivities. So what's the option? Option is very simple. We have seen the initiatives of Delhi Metro to provide last mile connectivities. Somehow it didn't work out. Somehow it didn't work out. The model was not a failure. The failure was on the business model. So that's the best way. The business model, what I mentioned in my opening statement, the business model should also be parallel to the need of the commuter as well as the operator. So it should be sustainable. So there should be a reliability in terms of getting a vehicle, whatever time of the day or night it may be, where you have a connectivity with an MRTS or a high-speed network, so that a person feels safe to go back to home, not to rush back, right? And has a very surety that yes, a vehicle should be there, or maybe an assurance that a vehicle would be there within some set of time. And there is an assurance of it. So that's how we call it last mile connectivities. And secondly, lots of things which are happening parallel is that the organization happening all around also, the brighter thing in terms of the electric rickshaws which are clogging the road space, they are now getting gradually organized. Metros are providing spaces for their charging infrastructures. They are also trying to get the seamless connectivity of payments of metro, though it has not happened because there are real issues and the challenges in the type of card what Delhi Metro uses. That's a technology as well as policy level hindrance. So that's, if that opens up, the seamless things will happen. Charging stations will be at the metro stations. The multimodal integration is also happening in terms of the areas around the metro links. So that's what we are also catering to. We are also doing a part of the transport demand modeling, the daytime modeling, the afternoon modeling, and the nighttime modeling. So we have to understand what's the peak demand and how we are going to cater to, and based on the movement and the travel pattern of the people. That's also a very important part of planning a public transport network, what we are doing. And similarly, what this we have consulted in other parts of the world.
Okay. All right. So this brings me to a question about cross-industry collaborations. right? We're talking of seamless connectivity. We're talking of seamless payment infrastructure. We're talking of everything that's seamless and well connected, right? And the auto industry in itself, or the mobility sector in general, may not be able to solve all the puzzles in this whole game. So how do you look at cross-industry collaborations, healthcare, insurance, the mobility sector, of course, all coming together to find solutions for the future? Prasad, maybe I can start with you.
Thank you. Yes, very much. I think I'm very positive to this because ultimately, when you talk about mobility, when you talk about a vehicle, you are dealing with a customer, right? So at the utility level, so the customer, if he or she wants to, let's say, buy an insurance or go to a restaurant or book tickets or maybe, buy grocery. So you name it. And a customer, these are customers' needs today. And if your vehicle is able to provide that to you on demand, I think that's it. That is what we, as an ecosystem, we have achieved the objective. So how this collaboration would happen, I mentioned that it's all about the being connected. So today, the car generates a lot of data. So if you are able to provide that platform, or if you are able to channelize that data and provide an access to the desired services, I think the ecosystem, which comprises of OEMs, then automotive electronic companies, the tier 1 suppliers, and then you have multiple payment gateways, right? Because ultimately, if you are not able to pay online or using your smartphone, then I think the entire model is going to get collapsed. So how do you really connect these things with the use of technology? I think that is going to define the cross-sectoral collaboration. And we are at 4G, and we are already talking about 5G, right? So China has launched its 5G, and I'm sure that we are on track to launch 5G services very soon. The moment we have the speed with us, whether it is over the air updates or whether it is a data transaction, right? I think we are there, and that's what the entire ecosystem is currently working on. And for all these services, what we have been talking, which are focused, is a single focus on consumer. So I think this cross-sectorial collaboration is the way forward to go, and things are happening currently. Thanks.
Anyone in the panel who'd like to add? Oh, yeah, please.
So, as what Prasad mentioned, data. Data is the only touch points which is going to connect everybody.
Right.
So, I would like to add just two more things, healthcare and the insurance. So, insurance will be one of the best beneficiary out of those data. And believe me, they are ready, and they will be, just waiting to get those data. That will decide the commuters as well as the customers, what they present as a service to, depending on the vehicle and driving models. Healthcares, the vehicles are getting connected, and any instance or incidents happening with the vehicle will have again the data getting into the healthcare services and the emergency services. So that's will also going to mature enough and giving healthcare in terms of accidents or any set of incidents.
It's not for no reason that data is called the fuel of the 21st century, right? Sriram?
So definitely, I think collaboration and co-creation is the key. I think the taxonomy of future. It's absolutely, there is no question about the fact of how an OEM needs to work very closely with a tier 1 supplier, needs to work with the emergency service provider, needs to work with telecom companies. Like in Europe, we're working with Vodafone as our national Europe supplier, where we not only provide the emergency services when the airbags kind of, explode, but also use that particular vehicle as a Wi-Fi opportunity, which provides the Wi-Fi services for people traveling in the car. So I think it's data connects us all, and I think every part of the industry that touches the consumer can potentially benefit while traveling, whether it's point A to B in a mass or in a car. I think it's a combined. With that, I think real estate, you can even use the engines from the car to power your house. We just had a couple of leaves. There's a leaf out here. Leaf has a technology where we can actually use it to power the house. So it is got a self-generated battery, and it powers the house. So this whole concept of co-creation and collaboration is going to continue significantly more than what it is now, I think.
I think we heard several examples on industries and collaborations, right? I think not very far from now, we would see convergence of industries. We have already seen that for telecom and media. 5 years, 10 years back, we had media as a separate industry and telecom as a separate industry. Right now, both of them are seen in the same light. Won't be surprised that 5 years down the line, automobile, with all its boundaries intact, whether that will continue, I doubt, because the way each of these industries will put their influences and the way the automobile industry would require collaboration from these industries, the boundaries would move and the boundaries would be fuzzy. And the boundaries would be fuzzy for not just for automobile, it will be fuzzy for a lot of other industries, because underpinning is data and underpinning is technology, and that is moving. And that is moving across platforms. Yeah.
Excellent. Atul, your thoughts?
Yep. Just a question before I answer. Do you get photocopies done today? Sometimes?
Sometimes.
You know what is the cost of a one A4 size photocopy? Just a guess. Last time, if you paid?
Last time I paid was 1 rupee per...
1 rupee.
1 rupee, yeah.
And we all go for once in a while health check, blood test. Typically, how long does it take? 2 hours and a couple of 100 rupees. Now, you talked about healthcare, right? So, I was chatting with a person who works in the rural India, and he asked me the same question, the photocopy thing. I said 50 paisa, 1 rupee. He said it costs 150 rupees in rural India. I said, how? I mean, it's the same paper, the same machine. I mean, even if it could be 5 times, 10 times, how could it be? He said, look, most of the rural India has no access to electricity. They don't have photocopy machine. If there is a document, you need to take a bus, go to a town, spend 1 day, half day. Of course, you travel there, you eat something, you buy something. So it's not 150 rupees, perhaps it's 250 rupees. And loss of earnings for that day, if he's a farmer or a laborer or someone. I was like shocked. And God forbid, if somebody tells you to get a blood test done, you go there, you wait, because you need to collect the report, go back, etc., etc. So it's a huge cost. So this person I'm talking about, what he did is that, so this is a kind of a startup, a rural-oriented startup. They have made an e-rickshaw, a humble e-rickshaw, into a convertible product. It does many things. It has got a screen, TV screen. It can open up as a shop. It can actually carry people, and it is connected. So what it has is a basic healthcare kit. So if you want to get a simple blood test done, it collects your sample, gives you a first report perhaps. It is also a medium to disseminate all the government policies. So there is a farm insurance, there is labor insurance, there is a bank account opening, education policies, scholarship policies for girls and whatnot. So it becomes that. It also carries people from village to town. It carries the fresh produce. In the evening, it becomes a shop. You sell those produce. When you go back, you carry what you buy from the town for the villagers and deliver it in the next morning. What has also done is also created employment for the people who are driving it, for the people. So there are people who can be small lab assistants, could be disseminating certain things. So that's, I think, an example of convergence of much more than, and they also have a soil testing, kind of a kit. So if you want to know what is the best crop, and so they can. And what it is also doing is not just creating all this; it is also collecting all this data. And it is far more than what I could imagine that a humble e-rickshaw bundled with few electronic devices could do. So that's, I think, the future and the example, which I think will have a large impact, not just on the rural area. I think this is something which will get replicated even in urban areas, maybe different applications, different challenges, but yeah.
But you're talking of immense possibilities,
Immense
in the future. I don't know how much time we have, but why don't we take some questions from the students here? Anyone with a question, please raise your hand. Identify yourself, and can you come closer? Yeah.
Good evening, all the dignitaries. I'm Nishant Malhotra from Mumbai University. I'm currently pursuing mechanical engineering from there. My question is to all of you, as we are talking about shifting to the EV base by 2030, but at the same time, the sales of the automobile is drastically plunged. So how do we challenge both the issues at the same time and have a better business model, or maybe better profits for the OEMs and the service providers?
Sriram, that's a question for you.
What did you read before you came here? No, I think it's an excellent question.
That should work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The industry is transforming, right? And every 6 years, I've been in the industry for almost 22 years now. Started in '96, and every 6 years the industry goes through a downturn, because you ask two questions. One is, how is it going to transform given all the changes in regulations, whether it's EV or others? Another is, how do you go through this downturn? How do you come out of it? And each time when the downturn happens, every 6 years, there is something new that emerges in the industry. Whether it was the diesel revolution, whether it was the BS3 to BS4 revolution, every time when the industry comes through the downturn, the industry transforms, because people are forced, and OEMs and suppliers are forced to transform. What's happening right now, while this industry has gone through a downturn because of various reasons, whether it's economy, whether it's consumer confidence in the industry, whether it's overall feeling of let's wait and see, there is a change in the regulations right now. And governments right now, India especially, whether or not consumer wants to change, our government, whether past or now, are forcing change to happen. Whether it's EVs, whether it's technology in public or public transport, whether it's the emission norms. Right now there is a huge change between what we call as Bharat Stage 4 to Bharat Stage 6. And that's causing a lot of change in the consumer, but it's also forcing us to innovate change, which is why we have to actually build choices in terms of ownership. There is the emergence of Uber, Ola, Zoom cars, subscription models, which is forcing us to change. I think what happens is, and go back to 2009 when there was a global recession that happened, companies changed. When there was demonetization in India, Paytm emerged and there was a huge change. So every time when there is a dip, transformation happens. And I am quite sure, any business will change and make sure that they come out of it. So 2030 is a long way, but companies have to make business. And I know within our own strategy rooms, we are constantly looking at how do we tackle this. There are multiple areas, not only from an OEM perspective and what we do with the vehicle, but also how is the channel with which we are connecting with customers is changing. How does the dealership that we have today in the automotive sector need to change, because they're not making money as well. And because they were equipped to do a much more business than what they are doing right now. So they are changing. They're employing a lot more digital-oriented salespeople than the people who you saw earlier as just pushing cars out at showrooms. So I think business transforms because business has to exist, and the fittest will survive, but the smartest will survive as well. And people who have access to technology and access to be able to transform, be flexible and nimble will survive. So I have no doubts about that.
I have another.
All right, please go ahead.
Yeah. And talking about shifting to the EV base by 2030, but seeing the current scenario of our country, we have a lot of population and also the scarcity of space. So how do we, I mean, I want to say is, how do we address the crumbling infrastructure, thing, so that we have this proper infrastructure so that we can address the charging solutions and the thing with the EVs.
All right. Soumya, I think, yeah, Sriram, you're just turning the right way.
Okay. Right. Again, it's a matter of transformation. So previously, we used to have in Delhi CNGs, and in other parts of the state, we have diesel vehicles. Now, we are seeing the state transport undertaking and other public transport vehicles coming up with EVs. So what we do about it? Very simple two things. We have depots. For public sector bus operations, they have an ample charging space, right? So those depots are getting transformed, whether it is a place, a proper area of demarcation, the charging infrastructure. Based on that, the power utilities are being shifted, right? So that's happening. But what about the private operators who are not having depot spaces, or maybe just one bus? They park it somewhere outside their house. Will they have an access to charge their vehicles? Yes, they will do. They do have, because the power requirements are getting transformed again. Previously, for buses, the requirement of power infrastructures were pretty big. Now it can be used with a household power connections. What we can see with general e-rickshaws, they are drawing power from households. Buses can also get power from households. So that's two simple ways to address this. Yes, where there are no spaces at all, public spaces needs to be made. They have to be prepared. And one more important thing is what you mentioned about, other than public transport, the private vehicles which are been used. There are spaces which are again been created. The opportunity charging stations are been operated. There are several discoms as well as other entities coming forward to set up charging infrastructure, opportunity charging infrastructures. But that should go, that should come up at a very fast pace, because without that, the adoption of EV by individuals are not going to happen in that same pace. So that's the basic infrastructure is required, which of course I'm very much hopeful. They are getting commissioned gradually, and that's the reason the EVs are getting adopted day by day and in a much bigger scale.
Right.
Sure.
If I can, I think while the charging solutions are getting built, even the technology around batteries is improving significantly. Like, the amount of kilometers, number of kilometers a battery could take a vehicle earlier is significantly improved. You got higher kilowatt batteries packed into, into a vehicle, which takes it to almost 250, 300 kilometers, and it's getting better. So I guess again, things force people to make changes.
Thanks. I have one point. Sorry. Yeah, there are two things. One is, to my understanding, I think it's very important to understand the policy, the policies and the provisions given under FAME 2. There's a lot of awareness needs to be generated, basically. So let's talk about two things. One is the public charging station. Just to quote an example, if you happen to go to Dwarka metro station, just below the metro flyover, right, you'll find there is a public charging station of Smarty. Smarty is a startup, and you won't believe, in fact, I visited a couple of times, and I saw that revolution is happening here, generally, public do not go unless and until you have curiosity or interest. So there are 60 charging points. And believe me, these are all Indian made. Nothing is imported, right? So if you talk about level 1, level 2, or any protocol which is available in international market, it's right here in India. If you happen to go to Mumbai, your place, Tata Power. Tata Power is, they have already installed 4 charging stations across the suburban areas. Likewise, if you come to Bangalore, Ather has got 38 charging stations. All these are public charging stations. And please understand, again, when Dipanshu mentioned about the collaboration, see, we don't have an option today. OEMs, they have to be open to collaborate with entire value chain. You don't have an option. So, and I'm really glad that be it number 1 utility vehicle maker in India or passenger car maker, everyone they have invested in the mobility services, and everyone is talking about electric vehicle. So, brief answer is, I think a lot of awareness needs to be generated. I think people, they need to take some time out and really study the provisions made under FAME 2 policy. A lot of support is being given by government under FAME 2, both for the electric vehicles, be it motors or the converters or the batteries, as well as the charging infrastructure. And second is that the openness of OEMs and their collaboration with these startups, right, be it Mahindra, with Smarty, or with Sun Mobility. I think the things are happening, maybe bits and pieces here and there, but that entire ecosystem is being developed. So I think these things, public charging station is taking, there is a momentum, and it's just that matter of time that we implement this at a large scale.
Excellent. Thank you, Prasad. I'm sorry, we are completely running out of time. If you wish, you can, I know that there are a couple of hands. Can I just take one more question? I saw your hand going up first. One last question to you, please. I'm sorry, you can take up the question with the experts off stage.
So basically I want to ask you that we are moving towards smart mobility and all. So, but we are not thinking about the mobility waste, which is increasing day by day. So what is the technique to reduce that mobility waste, or to have any technique to overcome that problem? Because that waste will increase day by day, and then the pollution will also increase a lot.
Are you talking of pollution, mobility waste? What is it?
Sir, indirectly, as increasing the mobility waste will directly increase the pollution.
Okay, so
Let me quickly address that. So I think what you are referring to, and let me first check with you what is your question. So if you are saying that there are a number of vehicles getting added and they finally see end of life, so there is a waste generated, right? I think this is more of a, in general, if you see, this is to do with the environmental policies which most of the countries have, and India also to have now a stringent code on this. So there is a huge recycling industry which is building up. We are already consciously as a country, as you know, as a national program, we are reducing single-use plastic and whatnot. Specifically, one important thing, so we have been having increase in mobility in any case, So the number of vehicles has been anyway increasing. Because of EVs, actually, the number of moving parts go down. So the amount of metal and amount of various parts which were consumed in a vehicle is reducing. So in that sense, it's becoming lighter, simpler. So waste proportion would reduce. What new element gets added is a battery. And battery, of course, as we all know, has a variety of toxic elements into it. However, at this point of time, there has been constant research, and today it's also possible to recycle those batteries, and it gives you two advantages. One, it takes care of environment, and second, there is a lot of precious metal, which is, or the precious elements, which are anyway not in abundance, for example, lithium, cobalt, and whatnot, is also being recovered for reuse. You know, so I think, of course, as I said in the beginning, human is never satisfied. You know, so we create new solutions. Of course, we create problems, but we also find solutions to address them. So I think this is what is the way forward, and we are going ahead with that.
Right. Gentlemen, we'll put an end to this discussion here. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful panel. Appreciate you being with us and for you being a wonderful audience.